year, like clockwork, Forbes drops its shiny new list of the world's billionaires, a global roll call of power, influence, and obscene wealth. In 2025, they counted 3,028 billionaires across the world. And guess how many are African? 22. Not 200, not even 50. 22. And here's the kicker. It's mostly the same familiar faces, right? Aliko Dangote, Johan Rupert, Patrice Motsepe. Year after year, Africa, the continent of over 1.4 billion people, makes up less than 1% of the world's billionaires. So in today's episode, we're breaking down Forbes 2025 Africa's Billionaires List and asking a simple question with a very complicated answer. Why aren't there more African billionaires? And what does that say about the way Africa creates, builds, and tracks wealth? But before we dive in, I want to invite you to be a part of something bigger. Here at Genius TV, we're building a space for global Black stories told with truth, care, and power. If this matters to you, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and consider joining our membership or dropping a super thanks to support this work. Now let's break it down. First, let's examine the list. There are 3,028 billionaires in the world, according to Forbes. Now, this is a record high for the publication. Forbes has been tracking billionaires worldwide since 1987, when it started off with just 140 individuals. Over the years, this number has surged, crossing the 1,000 mark in 2006 and 2,000 in 2017. In 2025, the list has reached a new milestone with 3,028 billionaires globally, an increase of 247 from the previous year. Collectively, these individuals have a net worth of 16.1 trillion, dollars, a nearly $2 trillion rise compared to 2024. Now, it was a record year for Africa's billionaires as well. Their cumulative wealth surpassed $100 billion for the first time. Africa's 22 billionaires saw their fortunes rise to a total of $105 billion, up from $82 billion and 20 billionaires last year. But still, when you zoom out, the math just doesn't add up. The 22 Africans represent less than 0.73% of the list, less than 1%, for a continent that makes up 17% of the world's population. That's a staggering difference. Now let's break that down. Those 22 billionaires came from just 9 African countries. South Africa leads with 7. Nigeria and Egypt have 4 each. Morocco has 2. And Algeria, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Eswatini, and Angola all have 1 each. Now pause. You're telling me that Nigeria, with all the wealth we see, the Bentleys, the private jets, the estate in Banana Island, only has 4 billionaires? Come on. I'm sorry. I don't buy it. Nigeria probably has hundreds, maybe even thousands of billionaires. Just not the kind Forbes can track. Because that money, it's not sitting in a publicly disclosed portfolio. But we'll come back to that. But you know what really shocked me is Ghana. Ghana has 0 billionaires on the list. Not one. And as a matter of fact, no one from Ghana has ever showed up on this list before. And I gotta say, that's concerning. This is a country where a 40-year-old recently threw one of the most extravagant birthday parties the continent has ever seen. Tens of millions of dollars spent on decor, fireworks, celebrity performances, you name it. But still, no billionaire on the books? Come on, Ghana. Come on. We gotta step it up. Even Eswatini, a tiny country of just 1 million people, has a billionaire on the list. Ghana, we're still waiting for you. And what about the other heavyweights? Kenya, the so-called tech capital of Africa. Ethiopia, the third most populous country on the continent. Not a single name. So you start to wonder, what's really going on here? Why are there so few people on the list? Well, I'll tell you what. It's not because Africans aren't brilliant or entrepreneurial. In fact, Africa is bursting with innovators, business moguls, and market movers. The problem is deeper. It's systemic. It's about how wealth is created, where it's tracked, and why it rarely scales to the billion-dollar level we see in Silicon Valley or Shanghai. Let's talk about infrastructure. And no, I don't just mean roads and electricity, right? Though those are part of it. I mean financial infrastructure. You see, many African economies are still struggling to build functioning capital markets, the kind that let entrepreneurs take a good idea, raise millions in investment, and scale it into an empire. In the US, if you build an app that delivers lunch to people's doorsteps, you could get venture capital, expand nationwide, go public on the NASDAQ, and boom, overnight, you could be worth $2 billion. Well, not overnight, maybe in 5 years. Try that in most African countries and you hit a wall. There's also limited VC funding, unreliable banking systems, bureaucratic red tape, and in some cases, electricity that cuts out mid-Zoom pitch. How do you pitch a global vision when you can't keep the lights on? In the US, wealth is created through access to the capital markets, the stock market, where you can double, triple your wealth just by investing it in stocks and watching it grow. This lack of financial and operational infrastructure chokes businesses before they can breathe. It's like planting a seed in sand and wondering why it doesn't grow. But let's keep it real. It's not just about infrastructure. Sometimes it's about mindset. Because here's the truth. A lot of African entrepreneurs aren't building with scale in mind. They're thinking local. They're satisfied capturing their city, their town, maybe their country, but not the continent, and certainly not the world. They'd rather be a big fish in a small pond than risk swimming in deeper waters. Why? Because the international market is competitive. It's high stakes. It's risky. And let's be honest, most African entrepreneurs are risk averse. But you know who wasn't? Aliko Dangote, the wealthiest Black man on the list. Despite all the criticism he gets today, monopoly, market domination, you name it, Dangote didn't start out that way. He was just another player in the game. But the reason he became the winner, he took massive risks. While his competitors were playing it safe, Dangote bet big on infrastructure, logistics, and vertical integration. And when it worked, boom, he scaled fast, swallowed up the market, and became a cement powerhouse. That risk is what created the monopoly. But most African entrepreneurs aren't thinking like that. They're not building for scale. They're building for stability, comfort, and control. Want proof? Let's go back to that Burkina Faso episode I did on the breakdown. Remember, we talked about Itawa EV, the first locally produced electric vehicle in Burkina Faso. It was a bold idea, exciting move. But I asked a simple question. How does this great vision scale across Africa? How can we ensure that it scales across Africa? And the response I got from folks in Burkina Faso was telling. I mean, not everyone, but many of them said, oh, no, we don't want to scale. What are you talking about? We just want to build a small EV brand for Burkina Faso. We're not here to compete. And look, I respect that. But that mindset, that's exactly why we don't see more Africans on the Forbes list. Because if you're not thinking continentally, if you're not thinking globally, exponentially, you're not building for billionaire level impact. So yes, infrastructure matters, but so does ambition, so does vision, so does skill. And until we start changing how we build and how big we dare to dream, we'll keep asking the same questions about why we're not seeing more Africans rise to the top. Now let's flip the coin for a minute, because here's the truth. There are more African billionaires than what Forbes is showing. They just don't show up on paper. Why? Because Forbes tracks traceable wealth, right? Public companies, verified real estate, equity holdings, the kind of wealth that can be documented, audited, and indexed. But in much of Africa, wealth is informal. It is unregistered or even deliberately hidden. You've got political elites, powerful business figures, and transnational deal makers sitting on hundreds of millions, maybe billions, stashed in offshore accounts, luxury real estate in Dubai and London, or tucked away behind shell companies in the British Virgin Islands. Yes, their names don't hit the Forbes algorithm, but trust me, they're out there, moving through the shadows of weak institutions and opaque economies. And let's be clear, in some cases, some of their money was made through a legitimate enterprise. In others, let's just say it wouldn't survive a forensic audit. But if we're really talking about invisible wealth in Africa, we have to talk about politicians. Let's not kid ourselves. Some of the richest people in Africa are public officials. People who have never launched a company, never built a product, or innovated a thing, but somehow have amassed generational level wealth. And every now and then, the mask slips, a scandal breaks, a raid is conducted, and suddenly we discover millions of dollars in cash sitting in someone's basement. Take Ghana, for example. Not too long ago, authorities allegedly found over $1 million in cash stashed in a home of a government minister. This wasn't investment capital. It wasn't part of a business deal. That's hard currency that was just left in a duffel bag at home. And you have to ask, what business does a public servant have keeping that kind of money at home anyway? This isn't unique to Ghana. From Nigeria to South Africa to the DRC to Kenya, stories like this, they surface all the time. So while the official list tells one story, the unofficial list, the shadow list, that's a whole different conversation, my people. And let me just say, I will not be surprised if there are more African billionaires than the entire Forbes list of billionaires. I will not be surprised. But this raises a bigger, more critical question. If wealth isn't built transparently and isn't tracked openly, can it ever be leveraged to build real economic power for the continent? Now let's zoom out. Because this billionaire gap is not just about modern infrastructure or financial tools, it's about history. Let's talk about the legacy of extraction. You see, most African economies weren't designed to create wealth for Africans, right? They were designed by colonial powers to extract wealth from Africans. From the very beginning, the model was clear. Take the gold, take the diamonds, take the cocoa, the rubber, the oil, ship it out, process it in Europe or America, and sell it back to Africa at a profit. And post-independence, that model didn't disappear. It just changed hands. Multinational corporations, foreign investors, and yes, even local elites continued the same logic. Extract raw materials, export them, and keep value addition offshore. And that's the problem. Because you don't build billionaires by shipping out raw cocoa beans. You build billionaires by owning the chocolate factories, By controlling the brands, the patents, the logistics, the margins. Let's look at an example. Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, they produce over 60% of the world's cocoa. But the global chocolate industry, which is worth over $130 billion a year, almost none of that wealth stays in West Africa. Why? Because they don't control the brands. They don't own the processing plants. They don't control the trade routes or distribution networks. Meanwhile, companies like Nestle, Hershey's, rake in billions, while cocoa farmers often earn less than $1 per day. So how do you expect a Ghanaian billionaire to emerge in that equation? The same goes for oil, minerals, lithium, even tourism. Africa provides the raw material, but the profit, the power, the scale, that almost always stays somewhere else. This is what economists call the resource curse. But in Africa, it's more than that. It's a value curse because we export raw value and import finished wealth. And as long as that's the model, we'll just keep making other people rich with African resources while wondering why there are so few Africans on the billionaire list. All right, so we've diagnosed the problem. Now let's talk solutions, because it's not enough to just point out the flaws. We got to ask, what will it actually take to create more African billionaires? What needs to change so that African wealth isn't just hidden, hoarded, or hustled, but built, scaled, and recognized? Let's break it down. Number one, we need to build stronger financial ecosystems, right? Africa needs banks that lend, stock markets that function, and investment capital that flows. We also need to grow local venture capital, strengthen pension funds, make it easier for startups to raise money without pledging their grandmother's land title as collateral. Because a brilliant idea with no access to capital, what is that? We also need to shift the entrepreneur mindset, as I was saying. We've got to stop thinking small, and this is really something that bothers me. Because too many entrepreneurs are comfortable owning a chain of 3 shops when they could easily be building a national or continental brand. And it's time we stop seeing scale as a foreign thing. If the goal is generational wealth, global relevance, and true power, true economic power, we've got to think bigger. Think like builders. Think like owners. The next Dangote could be out there right now, selling packaged goods in a corner store. The difference? How they think about scale. And we also need to formalize the informal. Africa's informal economy is worth trillions, but it's invisible. If we want to track, grow, and protect wealth, we need to bring more businesses into the formal economy. That means better business registration systems, easier tax structures, digital payment tools, and incentives, not just penalties. Because when people register their business, they gain access to financing, protections, and the ability to build real equity. And we also need to invest in infrastructure, the right kind. Yes, we need roads and electricity, but we also need data centers, internet connectivity, cross-border logistics, and regional trade systems. Infrastructure isn't just physical. It's digital, financial, and yes, it's legal too. Let's stop building white elephant projects and start building economic ecosystems. And then, hey, the obvious one, we need to tackle corruption and strengthen our institutions. Let's say it plainly. If politicians are hoarding billions in cash in their homes while the private sector starves, nobody's winning. We need institutions that protect entrepreneurs, that enforce contracts, and make it harder for elites to drain national resources for personal gain. Transparency isn't just good governance, it's good business. And we also need to own the value chain. No more exporting raw materials and buying back finished products at 10 times the price. We need to process, brand, package, and sell our goods on our own terms. From fashion to food to tech, Africa must own its value chain. So, my people, why aren't there more African billionaires? It's not because the talent isn't here. It's not because we don't hustle hard enough. It's because the systems haven't been built. And when they are, too many of us are still thinking too small. But the future, it's still wide open. Africa is young. Africa is rich in people, in ideas, in potential. And if we get this right, the next Forbes list won't have 22 names. It'll have 100, then 200, then 1,000. But only if we stop playing small and start building for legacy. So now I turn it over to you. What do you think is the real reason we don't see more African billionaires on the global stage? And what would it take to change that in our lifetime? And also let me know if you agree with me that there are probably way more than 22 billionaires out there than what Forbes reported on its list. Let me know in the comments and let's have this conversation. And if you learned something new today or enjoyed watching this episode, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and drop a super thanks to support the work we're doing here at The Breakdown and Planet Genius TV so we can continue to bring you more stories like this. Thank you for staying with me. That's it for today's breakdown. Until next time, you take care. Hey, you! Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Also, visit face2faceafrica.com for your daily news and updates on what's going on within the global Black community so you can stay informed.